Modern History, Class 12th, Part 3. The Anglo-French Struggle in South India. The English East India Company's schemes of territorial conquest and political domination, which had been frustrated by Aurangzeb at the end of the 17th century, were revived during the 1740s because of the visible decline of the Mughal power. Nadir Shah's invasion had revealed the decay of the central authority, but there was not much scope for foreign penetration in western India, where the vigorous Marathas held sway, and the eastern India, where Alivardi Khan maintained strict control. In southern India, however, conditions were gradually becoming favorable to foreign adventurers. While central authority had disappeared from there after Aurangzeb's death, the strong hand of Nizam ul Mulk Asaf Jah was also withdrawn by his death in 1748. Moreover, the Maratha chiefs regularly invaded Hyderabad and the rest of south, collecting Chauth. These raids resulted in politically unsettled conditions and administrative disorganization. The Carnatic was embroiled in fratricidal wars of succession. These conditions gave the foreigners an opportunity to expand their political influence and control over the affairs of the South Indian states. But the English were not alone in putting forward commercial and political claims. While they had, by the end of 17th century, eliminated their Portuguese and Dutch rivals, France had appeared as a new rival. For nearly 20 years, from 1744 to 1763, the French and the English were to wage a bitter war for control over the trade, wealth and territory of India. The French East India Company was founded in 1664. It was firmly established at Chandra near Calcutta and Pondicherry on east coast. The latter was full fortified. The French company had some other factories at several posts on the east and the west coast. It had also acquired control over the islands of Mauritius and Reunion in the Indian Ocean. The French East India Company was heavily dependent on the French government, which helped it by giving it treasury grants, subsidies, and loans, and in various other ways. Consequently, it was largely controlled by the government, which appointed its directors after 1723. State control of the company proved quite harmful to it. The French state of the time was autocratic, semi-feudal, and unpopular, and suffered from corruption, inefficiency, and instability. Instead of being forward-looking, it was decadent, bound by tradition, and in general unsuited to the times. Control by such a state could not be but injurious to the interests of the company. In 1742, war broke out in Europe between France and England. The war in Europe between England and France soon spread to India, where the two East India companies clashed with each other. In 1748, the general war between England and France ended. Though war had ended, the rivalry in trade and over the possessions of India continued and had to be decided one way or the other. Dupleix, the French Governor-General at Pondicherry at this time, now evolved the strategy of using the well-disciplined modern French army to intervene in the mutual quarrels of the Indian princes, and by supporting one against the other, securing monetary, commercial or territorial favors from the victor. Thus, he planned to use the resources and armies of the local Rajas, Nawabs, and chiefs to serve the interests of the French company and to expel the English from India. The only barrier to the success of this strategy could have been the refusal of Indian rulers to permit such foreign intervention. But the Indian rulers were guided not by patriotism but by narrow-minded pursuit of personal ambition and gain. They had little hesitation in inviting the foreigners to help them settle accounts with their internal rivals. In 1748, a situation across the Carnatic and Hyderabad, which gave full scope to develop talents to intrigue. The Carnatic Chanda Sahib began to conspire against the Nawab Anwaruddin, and while in Hyderabad the death of Asaf Jah, Nizam ul Mulk, was followed by a civil war between his son Nasir Jung and his grandson Muzaffar Jung. Dupleix seized the opportunity and concluded a secret treaty with Chanda Sahib and Muzaffar Jung to help them with his well-trained French and Indian forces. In 1749, the three allies defeated and killed Anuruddin in a battle at Ambur. The latter's son Muhammad Ali fled to Trichinopoly. The rest of the Carnatic passed under the dominion of Chanda Sahib, who rewarded the French with a grant of 80 villages around Pondicherry. In Hyderabad too, the French were successful. Nasir Jung was killed and Muzaffar Jung became the Nizam or Viceroy of the Deccan. The new Nizam rewarded the French company by giving its territories near Pondicherry as well as a sum of 500,000 to the company and another 500,000 to its troops. Dupila received 2 lakh and a Jagir worth rupees 1 lakh a year. Moreover, he was made honorary governor of Mughal dominions on the east coast from the river Krishna to Kanyakumari. Dupila stationed his best officer Bussy at the Hyderabad with French army, while the other ostensible purpose of this arrangement was to protect the Nizam from enemies. It was really aimed at maintaining French influence at his court. While Muzaffar Jung was marching towards his capital, he accidentally killed. Bussy immediately raised Salabat Jung, the third son of Nizam ul Mulk, to the throne. In return, the new Nizam granted the French the area of Andhra known as the Northern Sarkars, consisting of 4 districts of Mustafanagar, Ellore, Rajamundari, and Chikakol. The French power in South India was now at its height. Dupil's plans succeeded because his dreams. The French had started out by trying to win Indian states as friends. They had ended by making them clients or satellites. But the English had not been silent spectators of their rival successes. To offset French influence and to increase their own, they had been intriguing with Nasir Jung and Muhammad Ali. In 1750, they decided to throw their entire strength behind Muhammad Ali. Robert Clive, a young clerk at the company's service, proposed that French pressure on the Muhammad Ali besieged at Trincomalee could be released by attacking Arcot, the capital of Carnatic. The proposal was accepted and Clive assaulted and occupied Arcot with only 200 English and 300 Indian soldiers. As expected, Chanda Sahib and the French were compelled to raise the siege of Trincomalee. The French forces were repeatedly defeated. Chanda Sahib was soon captured and killed. The French fortunes were now at an ebb as their army and its general had proved unequal to the English counterparts. In the end, the French government, weary of the heavy expense of the war in India and fearing the loss of its American colonies, initiated peace negotiations and agreed in 1754 to the English demand for the recall of Dupila from India. This was to prove a big blow to the fortunes of the French company in India. The temporary peace between the two companies ended in 1756 when another war between England and France broke out. In the very beginning of the war, the English managed to gain control over Bengal. This had been discussed later in this chapter. After this event, there was little hope for French cause in India. The rich resources of Bengal turned scales decisively in the favor of English. The decisive battle of war was fought at Vandiwash on 22nd January 1760, when the English general Ayrcourt defeated Lally. Within the year, the French had lost all their possessions in India. The war ended in 1763 with the signing of the Treaty of Paris. The French factories in India were restored, but they could no longer be fortified or even adequately garrisoned with troops. They could serve only as centers of trade, and now the French lived in India under British protection. The English, on the other hand, ruled the Indian Sea. Freed from all European rivals, they could now set about the task of conquering India. During their struggle with the French, the Indian allies, the English learnt a few important and valuable lessons. Firstly, in the absence of nationalism in the country, they could advance their political schemes by taking advantage of mutual quarrels of the Indian rulers. Secondly, the Western trained infantry, European or Indian, armed with modern weapons and backed by artillery, could defeat the old style Indian armies with ease in pitched battles. Thirdly, it was proved that the Indian soldier, trained and armed in European manner, made as good a soldier as the European. And since the Indian soldier too lacked a feeling of nationalism, he could be hired and employed by anyone who was willing to pay him well. The English now set out to create a powerful army consisting of Indian soldiers called sepoys and the officered by Englishmen. With this army as its chief instrument and the vast resources of Indian trade and territories under its command, the English East India Company embarked on an era of wars and territorial expansion. British occupation in Bengal. The beginnings of British political sway over India may be traced to its Battle of Plassey in 1757, when the English East India Company forces defeated Siraj ud Dowlah, the Nawab of Bengal. The earlier British struggle with the French and South India had been put but a dress rehearsal. The lessons learnt there were profitably applied in Bengal. Bengal was most fertile and the richest of Indian provinces. Its industries and commerce were well developed. The East India Company and its servants had highly profitable trade interests in the province. The company had secured valuable privileges in 1717 under the royal Farman by the Mughal emperor, which had granted the company the freedom to export and import their goods in Bengal without paying taxes and the right to issue passes or dastaks for the movement of such goods. The company servants were also permitted to trade but were not covered by this Farman. They were required to pay the same taxes as Indian merchants. This Farman was a perpetual source of conflict between the company and the Nawabs of Bengal. For one, it meant losses of revenue to the Bengal government. Secondly, the power of issued dastaks for the company's goods was misused by the company's servants to evade taxes on their private trade. All the Nawabs of Bengal, from Murshid Quli Khan to Alivardi Khan, had objected to the English interpretation of the Farman of 1717. They had compelled the company to pay lump sums to their treasury and firmly suppress the misuse of dastaks. The company had been compelled to accept the authority of Nawabs in the matter, but its servants had taken every opportunity to evade and defy this authority. Matters came to head in 1756 when the young and the quick-tempered Siraj ud Dowlah succeeded his grandfather Alivardi Khan. He demanded of the English that they should trade on the same basis as in the times of Murshid Quli Khan. The English refused to comply as they felt strong after their victory over the French in South India. Instead of agreeing to pay taxes on their goods to the Nawab, they levied heavy duties on Indian goods entering Calcutta, which was under their control. All this naturally annoyed and angered the young Nawab, who also suspected that the company was hostile to him and was favoring his rivals for the throne of Bengal. The breaking point came when, without taking the Nawab's permission, the company began to fortify Calcutta in expectation of the coming struggle with the French, who were stationed at this time at Chandra. Siraj rightly interpreted this action as an attack upon his sovereignty. How could an independent ruler permit a private company of merchants to build forts or to carry on private wars on his land? In other words, Siraj was willing to let the Europeans remain as merchants but not as masters. He ordered both the English and the French to demolish their fortifications at Calcutta and Chandra and to desist from fighting each other. While the French company obeyed his order, the English company refused to do so, for its ambition had been whetted and its confidence enhanced by its victories in the Carnatic. It was now determined to remain in Bengal even against the wishes of the Nawab and to trade there on its own terms. It had acknowledged the British government's right to control all its activities. It had quietly accepted restrictions on its trade and power imposed in Britain by the British government. Its right to trade with the East had been extinguished by the Parliament in 1693 when its charter was withdrawn. It had paid huge bribes to the king, the Parliament, and the politicians of Britain in 1 year alone. For example, in 1 year alone, it had to pay £80,000 in bribes. Nevertheless, the English company demanded the absolute right to trade freely in Bengal, irrespective of the Bengal Nawab's order. This amounted to a direct challenge to the Nawab's sovereignty. No ruler could possibly accept this position. Siraj ud Dowlah had the statesmanship to see the long-term implications of the English designs. He decided to make them obey the laws of the land. Acting with great energy but with undue haste and inadequate preparation, Siraj ud Dowlah seized the English factory at Qasim Bazar, marched on to Calcutta and occupied the Fort William on 20th June 1756. He then retired from Calcutta to celebrate his easy victory, letting the English escape with their ships. This was a mistake, for he had underestimated the strength of his enemy. The English officials took refuge at a Fulta near the sea, protected by their naval superiority. Here they waited for the aid from Madras and in meantime organized a web of intrigue and treachery with the leading men of the Nawab's court. Chief among these were Mir Jafar and Mir Bakshi, Manik Chand and the officer in charge of Calcutta, Ami Chand, a rich merchant Jagat Seth, the biggest banker of Bengal, and Khadim Khan, who commanded a large number of Nawab's troops. From Madras came a strong naval and military force under Admiral Watson and Colonel Clive. Clive reconquered Calcutta in the beginning of 1757 and compelled the Nawab to concede to all demands of the English. The English, however, were not satisfied. They were aiming high. They had decided to install a more pliant tool in Sirajuddaullah's place. Having joined a conspiracy organized by the enemies of the young Nawab to place Mir Jafar on the throne of Bengal, they presented the youthful Nawab with an impossible set of demands. Both sides realized that the war to the finish would have to be fought between them. They met for a battle on the field of Plassey, about 30 kilometers from Murshidabad, on 23rd June 1757. The fateful Battle of Plassey was a battle only in name. In all, English lost 29 men, while the Nawab lost nearly 500. The major part of the Nawab's army, led by the traitors Mir Jafar and Rai Durlabh, took no part in fighting. Only a small group of Nawab soldiers, led by Mir Madan and Mohan Lal, fought bravely. The Nawab was forced to flee and was captured and put to death by Mir Jafar's son, Miran. The Battle of Plassey was followed, in the words of Bengali poet Nabin Chandra Sen, by a night of eternal gloom for India. The English proclaimed Mir Jafar the Nawab of Bengal and set out to gather the reward. The company was granted undisputed right to free trade in Bengal, Bihar and Orissa. It also received the zamindari of 24 Parganas near Calcutta. Mir Jafar paid a sum of 17 crore 700,000 as compensation for the attack on Calcutta to the company and the traders of the city. In addition, he paid large sums as gifts or bribes to the high officials of the company. Rupees 1 crore 77 lakhs as compensation for the attack on Calcutta to the company and traders of the city. In addition, he paid large sums as gifts or bribes to the high officials of the company. Clive, for example, received over 2 million rupees, Watts over 1 million. Clive later estimated the company and its servants had collected more than 30 million rupees from the puppet Nawab. Moreover, it was understood that the British merchants and officials would no longer be asked to pay any taxes on their private trade. The Battle of Plassey was an immense historical importance. It paved the way for the British mastery of Bengal and eventually the whole of India. It boosted British privilege, prestige, and at a single stroke raised them to the status of major contender for the Indian Empire. The rich revenues of Bengal enabled them to organize a strong army and meet the cost of the conquest of the rest of the country. Control over Bengal played a decisive role in the Anglo-French struggle. Lastly, the victory of Plassey enabled the company and its servants to amass untold wealth at the cost of helpless people of Bengal. As the British historians Edward Thompson and G.T. Garrett have remarked, to engineer a revolution had been revealed as a most paying game in the world. A gold dust unequalized since the hysteria that took hold of the Spaniards of Cortes and Pizarro's age filled the English mind. Bengal in particular was not to know peace again until it had been bled white. Even though Mir Jafar owned the position to the company, he soon repented the bargain he had struck. His treasury was soon emptied by the demands of the company's officials for presents and bribes. The lead in the matter being given by Clive himself. As Colonel Malleson has put it, the single aim of the company's officials was to grasp all they could to use Mir Jafar as a golden sack into which they could dip their hands at pleasure. The company itself was seized with unsurpassable greed. Believing that the Kamdhenu had been found and that the wealth of Bengal was inexhaustible, the directors of the company ordered that Bengal should pay the expenses of the Bombay and Madras presidencies and purchase out of its revenue all the company's exports from India. The company was no longer to merely trade with India, it was to use its control over the Nawab of Bengal to drain the wealth of the province. Mir Jafar soon discovered that it was impossible to meet the full demands of the company and its officials, who on their part began to criticize the Nawab for his incapacity in fulfilling their expectations. And so, October 1760, they forced him to abdicate in favor of his son-in-law, Mir Qasim, who rewarded his benefactors by granting the company the zamindari of districts of Burdwan, Midnapur, Chittagong, and giving handsome presents totaling of 29 lakhs of rupees to the English officials. Mir Qasim, however, bellied English hopes and soon emerged as a threat to their position and designs in Bengal. He was able to efficient and strong ruler determined to free himself from the foreign control. He realized that the full treasury and an efficient army were essential to maintain his independence. He therefore tried to prevent public disorder, to increase his income by removing corruption from the revenue administration, and to raise the modern and disciplined army along European lines. All this was not to the liking of English. Most of all, they disliked the Nawab's attempt to check the misuse of the Farman of 1717 by the company's servants, who demanded that their goods, whether destined for export or for internal use, should be free of duties. This injured the Indian merchants as they had to pay extra taxes from the foreigners who got complete exemption. Moreover, the company's servants illegally sold the dastaks or free passes to friendly Indian merchants who were thereby able to evade the internal custom duties. These abuses ruined the honest Indian traders through unfair competition and deprived the Nawab of a very important source of revenue. In addition to this, the company and its servants forced the Indian officials and zamindars to give them presents and bribes. They compelled the Indian artisans and peasants and merchants to sell their goods cheap and to buy dear from them. People who refused were often flogged and imprisoned. These years have been described by recent British historian Percival Spear as the period of open and unshamed plunder. In fact, the prosperity for which Bengal was renowned was being gradually destroyed. Mir Qasim realized that if these abuses continued, he could never hope to make Bengal strong or free himself from the company's control. He therefore took the drastic steps of abolishing all the duties of internal trade, thus giving his own subjects a concession that the English had seized by force. But the alien merchants were no longer willing to tolerate equality between themselves and Indians. They demanded the reimposition of the duties on Indian traders. The battle was about to begin again. The truth of the matter was that there could not exist two masters in Bengal. While Mir Qasim believed that he was an independent ruler, the English demanded that he should act as mere tool in their hands. For had they not put him in power? Mir Qasim was defeated by a series of battles in 1763 and fled to Awadh, where he formed an alliance with Shah Dudaulah and Nawab of Awadh and Shah Alam II, the fugitive Mughal emperor. The three allies clashed with the company's army at Buxar on 22nd October 1764 and were thoroughly defeated. This was one of the most decisive battles of the Indian history, for it demonstrated the superiority of English arms over the combined army of two of the major Indian powers. It firmly established the British masters of Bengal, Bihar and Odisha and placed Awadh at their mercy. Clive, who had returned to Bengal in 1765 as its governor, decided to seize the chance of power in Bengal and to gradually transfer the authority of government from the Nawab to the company. In 1763, the British had restored Mir Jafar as Nawab and collected huge sums for the company and its high officials. On Mir Jafar's death, they placed his second son, Nizam-ud-Dawla, on the throne and as a reward to themselves made him sign a new treaty on 20 February 1765. By this treaty, the Nawab was to disband most of his army and to administer Bengal through a deputy Subedar who was to be nominated by the company, who could not be dismissed without its approval. The company thus gained supreme control over the administration or Nizamat of Bengal. The members of the Bengal Council of the company once again extracted nearly 15 lakh rupees from the new Nawab. From Shah Alam II, who was still titular head of the Mughal Empire, the company secured the Diwani or the right to collect revenue of Bihar, Bengal, and Orissa. Thus, its control over Bengal was legalized and the revenue of the most prosperous Indian province placed at the command. In return, the company gave him a subsidy of 26 lakhs of rupees and secured for him the districts of Kora and Allahabad. The emperor resided in the fort of Allahabad for 6 years as a virtual prisoner of the English. The Nawab of Awadh, Sujaudollah, was made to pay a war indemnity of 5 million rupees to the company. Moreover, the two signed an alliance by which the company promised to support the Nawab against an outside attack, provided he paid for the services of the troops sent to his aid. This alliance made the Nawab dependent of the company. Dual system of administration of Bengal. The East India Company became the real master of Bengal at least from 1765. Its army was in sole control of its defense, and the supreme political power was in its hands. The Nawab depended for his internal and external security on the British. As the Diwan, the company directly collected its revenue, while through the right to nominate the deputy Subedar, it controlled the Nizamat or the police and the judicial powers. This arrangement is known in the history as the dual or double government. It held a great advantage for the British. They had the power without responsibility. The Nawab and his officials had the responsibility of administration, but not the power to discharge it. The weakness of the government could be blamed on the Indians, while its fruits were gathered by the British. The consequences for the people of Bengal were disastrous. Neither the company nor the Nawab cared for their welfare. The company's servants had now the whole Bengal to themselves, and their oppression of the people increased greatly. We can quote Clive himself: "I shall only say that such a sense of anarchy, confusion, bribery, corruption, and extortion was never seen or heard of in any country but Bengal, nor such and so many fortunes acquired in so unjust and rapacious manner. The three provinces of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa produced a clear revenue of 3 million sterling, have been under the absolute management of the company servants ever since Mir Jafar's restoration of the Subhaship, and they have both civil and military extracted and levied contributions from every man of power and consequence, from the Nawab down to the lowest zamindar. The company's authorities, on their part, set out to gather the rich harvest and drain Bengal of its wealth. They stopped sending money from England to purchase Indian goods. Instead, they purchased these goods from the revenues of Bengal and then sold them abroad. These were known as the company's investment and formed a part of its profit. On top of all this, the British government wanted its share of the rich price, and in 1767 ordered the company to pay £400,000 per year. In the years 1766 and 1767 and 1768 alone, nearly £5.7 million were drained from Bengal. The abuses of the dual government and the drain of wealth led to the impoverishment and exhaustion of the unlucky province. In 1770, Bengal suffered from a famine, which in its effects proved one of the most terrible famines known in human history. People died in lakhs, and nearly one-third of Bengal's population fell victim to its ravages. Though the famine was due to failure of the rains, its effects were heightened by the company's policies.